You've been lied to more times than you think. And the most dangerous part is not even the lie itself, but the fact that you didn't even notice it. Because real lies do not feel like lies. They do not look suspicious. They do not sound aggressive. They seem normal. They seem smooth. They seem convincing. And sometimes they even seem honest. And that is exactly why they work, because you do not question what feels natural. You do not analyze every word. You do not expect that the person in front of you is choosing right now what to hide and what to show. And while you are focused on the words, you completely miss what their body is revealing. And this is exactly where most people lose, not because they are not smart, but because they are looking in the wrong place. Think about this for a second. Have you ever had a conversation where everything seemed normal afterward? Nothing obviously wrong was said. Nothing clearly suspicious happened. But you felt something strange, not something specific, not something you could logically explain. Just a quiet feeling that something did not add up. As if the person's words and behavior did not match. As if there was a gap between what they said and what you felt. And you ignored it, told yourself you were overreacting, brushed it off, but later realized that you were right. That feeling is not random. It is not fantasy. It is not insecurity. It is your brain noticing signals that you have not yet consciously processed. Because here is the truth that most people never realize. When a person lies, their brain works completely differently. They are no longer just speaking. They are managing information, deciding what to say, what to hide, what to change, what to emphasize, and at the same time trying to look calm, natural, confident. And that creates internal pressure, overload, because now they are doing two things at once, creating a version of reality and maintaining the illusion that everything is fine. And the human brain is not designed to do that perfectly. And when that pressure rises, it does not disappear. It comes out, not through words, but through the body, through micro movements, through timing, through small inconsistencies that are almost impossible to fully control in real time. A slight pause before answering, a change in breathing, a shift in posture, eye contact that feels unnatural, movements that do not match the emotion. And each of these signals on its own may mean nothing, but together they create a pattern, and that pattern says more than words. The problem is that most people do not know how to see this. They focus on words instead of behavior. They listen instead of observing. They believe instead of analyzing, and because of that, they are easy to manipulate, easy to mislead, easy to influence, even without their awareness. And this does not happen only in obvious situations. It happens everywhere. In ordinary conversations, in friendships, in relationships, at work, in those moments where you feel comfortable, where you are not expecting anything bad. And that is exactly why it is so effective. Because not every lie has bad intentions. Sometimes people lie to protect themselves, to avoid conflict, to preserve an image, to control how they are perceived. And sometimes they are not even fully aware of it themselves, and that makes everything even more complicated, because then it does not look like deception. It looks like normal behavior, like personality, like a communication style. But the effect remains the same. Your perception changes without your participation. And here is what changes everything. Your brain notices these inconsistencies much earlier than you consciously understand them. That feeling in your stomach, that slight discomfort, that quiet tension, it is not weakness, it is not you making things up. It is awareness. It is your brain recognizing patterns faster than you can explain them logically. But most people ignore it because it is not clear, because it is not logical, because they cannot prove it, because on the surface everything looks normal. And that is exactly how they lose touch with their own perception. Because lies do not always break logic. They break consistency. Consistency between words and body, between expression and intention, between what is said and what is shown. And when you start paying attention to that, everything changes. And the strongest part is that once you start seeing this, you cannot stop noticing it. It becomes automatic. You see the delay before an answer, the forced smile, the unnecessary movements, the way a person repeats your question to buy time. And these things seem small, but they are not random. They are signals, and signals are everything. But before we go further, you need to understand one important thing. No single signal means that a person is lying. That is the biggest mistake people make. They see one detail and draw a conclusion. But real understanding is about patterns. It is several signals together. It is repetition. It is inconsistency that becomes noticeable over time. Because lying is not just hiding the truth. It is controlling perception. And the more a person tries to control how they are seen, the more pressure they create inside. And pressure always leaves traces. And when you understand this, you begin to see people differently. You become calmer, more attentive, less reactive. You stop believing everything at face value and start seeing what is really happening. So what you are about to see now is not just about lying. It is about understanding people on a deeper level. It is about noticing what most people completely miss. And once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it. Part 2. Now that you understand how deception works on a deeper level, it is time to look at the specific signals, the very ones that most people completely miss, not because they are invisible, but because they are subtle. And subtle things are easy to ignore if you do not know what to look for. And remember this: no single signal means that a person is lying, but when several signals appear at the same time, when patterns begin to form, that is when everything becomes clear. The first signal is a delay in response, and this is one of the most frequently ignored signals because it looks very normal. You ask a simple question, and before the answer there is a small pause, not long enough to be obvious, but enough for something to feel different. And that pause matters because when a person is telling the truth, their brain is simply recalling information. But when they are lying, their brain is creating information, and creating always takes more time than recalling. So that small delay, that moment when the person looks away, repeats your question, or hesitates slightly before answering is not random. It is their brain buying time to build an answer that sounds convincing. The second signal is unnatural eye behavior. And this is where most people get it wrong, because they think liars avoid eye contact. But that is not always true. In fact, many people who lie do the opposite. They hold eye contact too long because they are trying to look honest. They are almost thinking, if I look confident, they will believe me. But natural eye contact moves, it breaks, returns, changes, while artificial eye contact looks fixed, tense, controlled. On the other hand, some liars really do avoid eye contact, especially if they are nervous. So what matters is not whether the person is looking at you or not, but whether it looks natural. Because control always means effort, and effort means that something is being hidden. The third signal is inconsistency in facial expressions, and this is a very strong indicator, because the face can lie, but not perfectly. A person may say something positive, but their micro-expressions show something else. A brief flash of tension, discomfort, or irritation that disappears almost instantly, too fast for you to consciously register, but your brain still notices it. For example, a person says, "I'm happy for you," but for a split second you see tension in their face, And that is the moment when the real emotion slips through before the mask fully covers it. The fourth signal is excessive self-touching, and this is the body's way of dealing with stress. When a person lies, the level of tension inside rises, even if on the outside they look calm, and that tension looks for an outlet. So movements appear such as touching the face, neck, hands, adjusting clothes, covering the mouth. And these actions are not random. They are self-soothing responses, the body's way of reducing internal pressure. And the key thing here is change. If these movements suddenly appear or intensify at certain moments, that is already a signal. The fifth signal is body position and distance, and this is very subtle but very revealing. When a person feels comfortable and is telling the truth, their body is usually oriented toward you, open posture, relaxed state. But when they are uncomfortable or hiding something, their body may turn slightly away, even if the face remains turned toward you. The feet may point toward the exit, the torso may be angled, and this creates a gap between where they are physically and where they are psychologically, as if part of them already wants to leave the situation. The sixth signal is over-explaining, and this seems strange, because logically you would think liars say less, but often they do the opposite. They add unnecessary details to make the story sound more convincing, more real. But in reality, they are simply trying to fill the gaps, trying to make the story stronger than it needs to be. The truth is usually simple, while lies are often overloaded with details you did not even ask for. And that is exactly what should make you cautious. The seventh signal is changes in voice and tone. And this is something most people feel but do not analyze. When a person lies, their voice may change. The pitch rises slightly, the rhythm shifts, tension appears. They may speak faster or slower than usual. And this happens because internal pressure affects even the way they speak. And here is what makes all of this so powerful. These signals do not look like lies. They look like normal behavior. And that is exactly why they are easy to miss, because if it were obvious, you would notice immediately. But subtle signals require attention. And once you begin to see these patterns, something changes. You become more observant, less reactive. You stop taking everything literally and start seeing what is happening at a deeper level. But the most important thing is not to turn into a person who suspects everyone. This is not about fear. It is about awareness, because awareness gives you choice, gives you the ability to pause, to look, not to react automatically, and that makes you much harder to manipulate, because people can control words, but they cannot fully control the body, and the more they try, the more signals they leave behind. And now that you see these signals, the question is no longer whether people lie. The question is what you are going to do with that. And here is the part most people do not expect, because the ability to recognize lies does not immediately make everything easier. It does not give instant clarity, and it definitely does not make you comfortable right away. In fact, for most people, it works the opposite way. It makes everything more complicated, more layered, sometimes even overwhelming, because once you start noticing these signals, once you begin to see these small inconsistencies, these subtle gaps between what people say and what they show, you begin to realize something that is hard to ignore. This is not rare. This is not an exception. This happens constantly in ordinary conversations, in everyday interactions, in places where you feel safe, around people you trust. And that realization can be uncomfortable in a way you did not expect, because now you are no longer just hearing words. You are seeing behavior. You are noticing timing, tone, micro reactions. You are catching things that previously passed by you completely. And suddenly conversations feel different. Not worse, but deeper, more open, more real, because now you see what is happening beneath the surface. And once this awareness appears, it does not go away. But this is where everything becomes even more complicated, because not every lie is meant to harm you. Not every inconsistency means that a person is trying to manipulate you. Sometimes people lie to protect themselves, sometimes to avoid conflict, sometimes to preserve an image, sometimes because they themselves do not fully understand their motives. And that is exactly what makes everything more difficult, because now it is no longer only about exposing lies. It is about understanding people, and those are completely different things. Because if you focus only on catching lies, you become reactive. You start looking for problems, you start doubting everything, you start analyzing every little detail, and that can pull you into a state where you see tension even where there is none. And that is no longer awareness. That is overstrain, that is hypervigilance, and it leads not to clarity, but to even more confusion. But real awareness looks different. It is calm, it is observant. It does not make rushed conclusions. It does not need instant answers. It simply notices. It records patterns. It gives you the opportunity to pause instead of react. And it is exactly in that pause that your power lives. Because in that moment, you have a choice. You can ignore what you see, like most people do. You can confront immediately, which often creates resistance. Or you can do something much stronger. You can adapt. You can ask better questions. You can slow the conversation down. You can observe more before reacting. You can choose not to enter that interaction on the same level. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply take a step back, because awareness is not about controlling others. It is about controlling how you respond to what you see. And that kind of control is completely different, because it does not depend on other people. It does not require proof. It does not require confirmation. It comes from your ability to trust your own perception, even if it is not perfect, even if it is not yet fully clear. And this is exactly where most people get lost, because they were taught to trust words more than feelings, to trust logic more than intuition, to trust explanations more than experience. So when something feels wrong but they cannot explain it, they ignore it, they cover it up, they dismiss it. And that is exactly where they lose clarity, because that feeling, that slight discomfort, that quiet tension, that feeling that something does not add up, it is not weakness, it is awareness. It is your brain seeing patterns earlier than you can explain them logically. And when you begin to listen to that, instead of ignoring it, everything changes. You no longer fall into the same situations. You are no longer influenced in the same way. You do not lose yourself so easily, because now you are not simply reacting to words. You are seeing what is really happening. And here is where it gets even deeper. The more you begin to notice these patterns in others, the more you begin to notice them in yourself. The moments when you hesitate, the moments when you change your words, the moments when you soften your reaction to avoid tension, the moments when you choose comfort instead of honesty. And suddenly, this is no longer only about other people. This is about understanding human behavior from both sides, because awareness always works both ways. And when you reach this level, something changes. You become more aware, calmer, more honest with yourself. You begin to understand your reactions, your emotions, your decisions better. And that creates something most people never have enough of: clarity. Not perfect clarity, but enough to see what matters, enough to notice when something does not add up, enough to trust yourself even without the full picture. And that is exactly what separates a person who is easy to manipulate from one who is no longer easy to manipulate. Because manipulation, deception, confusion, all of it works only when there is no awareness, when you do not notice. when you ignore your feelings, when you trust words more than patterns. But the moment awareness appears, even a little, these mechanisms begin to lose their power, because now you see it. And when you see it, you no longer react the same way. You pause more. You observe more. You think more. You choose more carefully. And from that state, you do not just avoid deception. You understand what is happening right in the moment. And that is where everything changes, because now you are not inside the situation. You are aware of it. And awareness creates distance. And distance gives control, not over others, over yourself, over your reactions, over your decisions, over the way you see reality. And that is the kind of control no one can take from you. So the next time you are in a conversation when something feels slightly off, do not ignore it. Do not rush. Do not explain it away immediately just because you cannot prove it. Pause. Look. Pay attention. Because the signals are always there. Most people just never learn to see them. And once you do, you will never look at people the same way again.